Ringo, we love the new album. How is it different than when you recorded Sgt. Pepper? You know, they go right there, and you're right in Beatleland, and he said this in interviews. You know, people ask, are you going to write your biography? And he says, well, why? People only want to hear about the same 8 years anyway. I made them a vow, and I kept to it. I said, I won't mention the B word once, okay? Not once will I mention it. And I kept my word. And they let me keep going with them. As they had said originally, figure on 15, 20 minutes. I'm like, all right, well, we'll see what we can do. And as we were getting to 15 minutes, they were giving me the sign like, keep going. He's like, he's enjoying this. Like that you're talking about his solo work and about Barbara and about George and Paul as it related to that album.
You sparked something in him.
Yes, and Harry. You know, Harry Nilsson is all over that album. He co-produced it. And it really is a terrific album. You guys familiar with Stop and Smell the Roses?
By the way, Harry said he wrote that song, right?
Yeah.
The original title was Stop and Take the Time to Smell the Roses.
That is the name of the song. The album.
No, he said that was going to be the name of the album.
Oh, they shortened it a bit.
I know they did,
album.
but I'm just telling you, he wrote the song and he said that was going to be the title.
Yep.
So
that's right, and we talked about all the songs on that album, and I told him there's a few. Literally, I think some of his best cuts. He does a wonderful version of "Sure to Fall," which at the time we didn't know the Beatles were doing that on the BBC. We hadn't heard the BBC stuff, So getting him to talk about that was as close as I came to mentioning the B word. I said, "You and Paul." That song goes back a ways with you guys, right? Carl Perkins. I skipped right over the Beatles and went right to Carl Perkins. And if he went down Beatle Road, well, that was his choice. But I kept my word on that one.
Good. Well, we could talk for hours, but you know what? It's 12:15.
Get out of here.
That's what I want to do. I got to be awake in about 4 or 5 hours.
I know.
So
early birds tomorrow,
thank you
right?
so much for sticking around. Tomorrow? Hope you enjoyed that.
Is it another film moment?
We're open at 10:30 tomorrow morning. We have
10:30, another film moment.
Huh? Oh, thank you. We love you too. Thank you. Peace and love, everybody. Yep. And let's get some sleep tonight. And
10:30 movie premiere right here. Right?
Right here.
The Chris O'Dell
Chris
movie,
O'Dell.
Right? Yep.
A world premiere of film. We're showing the first 45 or 50. Started playing, and you haven't left yet. Let's hear it for Drew in Liverpool. Woo! Part of the family. So, I'm assuming some of you saw me do this talk 10 years ago. I know you did. Well, I haven't, except for telling it in Liverpool last summer, I haven't told it since. So I thought the 50th anniversary would be a good time to do it. So I'm going to tell it with all the bells and whistles because I know all of you in here want to hear all those little tiny details. So with no pre-planning in my head, what am I going to say? If I get stopped for a second, I'll just start up again. Okay. Shh, 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 shh. Hey, shh, shh. Hey, John, Mark's talking over here. Give me a break. Next time you're singing, you want me to interrupt you? Great, thanks, John. Wonderful job tonight. So let's start when I first thought of the idea and how did it happen. You know, there's a lot of noise out there. That's what it is. Hey guys in the bar area, could you turn it down a little bit in the volume? No, they're in the bar area. Okay. I guess we can't do anything about that noise, huh? Bob, you're good at sound. Okay. So, it was Thanksgiving weekend in 1973. And I was working at Sam Goody. I was a record store manager in their biggest store, the Radio City store. Does anybody remember that Sam Goody store? That was the record department there was 3 managers. I was the record guy, of course. And I was out on a date, and I decided let's go for dessert, Upper East Side. So going to an ice cream place, and over a dish of vanilla ice cream, I said, you know, somebody should do something to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Beatles' arrival in America. And the word Beatlefest just popped in my head. I don't know where it came from. It just came into my head. And I was talking about it for a while, and then, the holiday season, I didn't think of it much anymore. And in January, after the new year, I said, well, why don't I try to put this together? I'll get a hotel, I'll write all the Beatles letters. I was telling anybody, my family and friends, that I'm not going to do, if I do it, I'm not going to do it without their permission. This was a cocky 27, 28. I just turned 28 in 70. No, I turned 26 in 74. So I went to the Commodore Hotel, the old Commodore Hotel, where we had our 40th anniversary show 10 years ago. It became the Hyatt, the Grand Hyatt. But the old Commodore Hotel was the old Commodore. It was very old. So I booked it. I put down my own money. My father didn't help me. Nobody else helped me. I put down my own money as a deposit, and I signed the contract for September 7th and 8th. So this was somewhere, I guess mid-January, probably right around the time that I turned 26. My birthday's in mid-January. So I booked it. So I proceeded to write 4 letters to John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And in case they didn't want to read it because they're too busy, I went to the trouble of making 4 cassettes. And I mailed them out. I don't remember where I mailed them to, but I must have found some addresses. I mailed them out, and I heard nothing. Hey, Tom.
Hi, Mark.
How are you?
Good. I'm actually 5 minutes early. You're 15 minutes.
Well, the band finished early.
Awesome.
So we're here. Tom Frangione.
That's me. So, go on.
Okay, so I sent the cassettes out and letters out, and I proceeded to take my first ad out in the Village Voice. I believe it was February 4th. Could have been 3rd. It was some early February. It was a 2-line ad. It cost me $14.
Wow.
A classified ad. Beatlefest, anybody interested, send to P.O. Box 78, North Hackensack Station, River Ranch, New Jersey, 07661.
And the ad is about the size of a fortune cookie, right?
It's 2 lines. It's 2 lines.
It's like the size of a fortune cookie.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. So the ad ran, and about 3 days later, I go to the post office, and there's a sack of mail waiting for me. It was like over 200 in the first 3 days, over 300 in the first week, and I think it made it up to about 400 letters, or what notes or whatever people said. And I said, whoa, a 2-line ad, $14?
Wow. Good thing you didn't take out the half page like they wanted to sell you for $18.
Right.
You know.
But it was amazing. I was stunned. So, what did I do next? I didn't do much next. I just kept, doing some planning. Talking about what would it be like to do a convention? What kind of things we'd want in the convention? So, that's what I spent, I guess, February, March, and April, and then April 26th, 1974.
Boom, boom.
WABC's Cousin Brucey makes an announcement. It says, for the March of Dimes walkathon starring the Fifth Dimension, it was their first March of Dimes, John Lennon and Harry Nilsson will be appearing in Central Park at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Wow. I told everybody, I'm going to meet John on Sunday. I'm going to meet him on Sunday. I totally believe that. God's honest, I really felt that I knew I was going to meet him. It was just not a question. Of course, everybody thought I was nuts.
And how many people show up in Central Park that
It was only 100,000 people.
Only 100,000.
100,000 people.
Okay.
So how did this happen? How did I meet John? Saturday night, the 27th, John Oh, wait, wait, I'm skipping the part of the story. Wait, hold it. I should go back to that. Okay, let's go back a little bit. That week, Sam Goody, for those of you who remember record stores, right? Every
Who
couple...
here's ever been in a record store? Okay.
Okay. So,
all right.
So the big records, you know, Sam Goody was like the biggest, and there was also Corvettes and other places. We'd have second record sales. So maybe for a week, it would always be for a week. So it might be Columbia Records. It might be Decca. It might be Capitol Records. That week, it happened to be the Beatles. It's totally coincidental, nothing to do with the other, because they plan those weeks ahead of time. I'm not the one who plans them. It's management plans them.
At that time, we were actually going through really the first renewed wave of Beatlemania.
Yeah.
Right? Not just because of the anniversary coming up, but 73, end of 73, Band on the Run, and Ringo and everything, they were ruling the charts as solo artists.
Right. In 74, there wasn't that much activity in the first part of 74, right? A little bit.
A lot of those singles, they were still singles, like Band on the Run and the Ringo singles, and of course the 73 albums of the Red and Blue, which we've just gotten remixed, those were still selling.
They were still selling.
Like, this was all part of that first renewed wave of Beatlemania.
Okay, so at Sam Goody's, we had all the Beatle records on sale. As a fan, I found out that Capitol Records had made a 10th anniversary T-shirt, saying a big 10 on it, and the Beatles, and with the images. So I called Capitol. They were only a few blocks away, 54th Street. I said, I'd like some shirts for my store. We were the biggest store in the city. We don't know anything about it. Okay, so what do? Give up?
No, never.
I called Capitol Records on the tower in Hollywood. I said, you guys have the shirt. We're doing I run the biggest store in New York City. I'd like to get the shirts. So the guy says to me, how many do you want? I said, give me 3 dozen shirts. So he sends 3 dozen shirts to me. Nobody else, I have a locked room. Nobody else had any ability to get those shirts. Every one of my salespeople wore the shirts for the whole week, for the sale. So those are the only people, not all the other Sam Goody stores, because they didn't do this. Only I did it, because as a fan, I knew that there was a shirt, being a fan. I heard it through the grapevine. Marvin Gaye,
different act.
So, the sale's going on all week. The announcement is made Friday night. That's when I tell everybody, I'm meeting John on Sunday. And Sunday rolls around. And it happened to be a warm day. You could check it in your almanac. Google it. It 82 degrees high, and it was like 70 in the morning when I left. I left pretty early in the morning because I wanted to get a good seat on the grass. So I go early, I'm wearing my shirt, and we're there a few hours, and I spot this guy maybe, I don't know, 200 yards away, when I could see that far. Maybe 300. So I get up, and it's 100,000 people. You know what 100,000 people sitting on a lawn is like, right? You've probably been to concerts in Central Park. You know, there's people everywhere. Excuse me, sorry, excuse me. All right, so I'm walking, and I get to this guy, and he's wearing the same shirt as me. Same exact shirt. And I'm the only one who had the shirts in New York. Nobody else had them. I knew every person who had them. And I didn't recognize him. I said, where'd you get that shirt? Oh, where'd you get this shirt? And he proceeds to tell me the story that last night I was driving my pickup, my van, through Times Square, and I see these 2 guys who may have been a little inebriated, sitting on the curb at 42nd Street and Broadway. So he stops his van, he gets out, and of course he recognizes these people as 2 guys named John Lennon and Harry Nilsson. And he says, can I give you a lift anywhere? And John looked at him and said, could you take me back to our hotel? He said, sure. So they got up, they got into the hotel, they got up in the van, And they drove to the hotel. It was the Pierre Hotel, but I should forget. I'll put in that hotel name later. Goes to the hotel, and John invites him up. So he goes up to thank the guy. He talks like 10, 15 minutes, and he signs an autograph. And John gives him a shirt. Just because John had the shirts, why wouldn't he? So.
And you thought you were the only one.
And I
Shame
was the
on
only
you.
one. So I said, where was the, what hotel was he at? And he says, the Pierre Hotel. Makes sense, Fifth Avenue, 2 blocks from where he was going to be talking on Sunday. And then I said to him, what room was he in? And he says, 10, I don't remember the room number. He says something like 1019. He tells me the room number where John Lennon was staying. 100,000 people in New York at an event, and he's the only guy who knows where John Lennon was staying, right across the street from the park. I said, thank you. I wish I would have gotten his name and number. I wasn't thinking about it at the time.
This is your life. We found him. We have him here tonight. We have the guy who drove John and Harry back to the hotel for you, Mark.
Okay. So, a little while later, John and Harry come on the stage. You've seen pictures of this, holding the kids.
Yeah.
And they talk for
And
15, 20 minutes with Cousin Bruce.
Stage, yeah.
I mean, nothing heavy, no secrets revealed, nothing like that. It was just
you can find that stuff
But
on
it was
YouTube,
great. It was
yeah.
great to see him. I sat maybe, I don't know, maybe 150, pretty close, within 100 yards, because I got there very early. So the talk is over. I guess they introduced The Fifth Dimension, which was the musical highlight, and I left. And I walked over to the Pierre Hotel. I walked into the lobby. Now, you can't walk in the hotels in New York City nowadays. You can't
it's
do
like
this.
saying I went to the airport and just went down to the gate and waited. No,
That's how it
it's
used
a
to be.
different world.
So I walk into the lobby. I press the elevator button. No, first I sat down on a little couch. I'm going like this. You can do it, Mark. You can do it. Calm down. Calm down. Heart, get back in your body, would you please? So I get up. I push the button. I go up to the 10th floor. I ring the bell. It's a fancy hotel, so you ring the doorbell. It's a suite. And Harry Nilsson opens the door.
As he would.
As he would. As he later on, we became very good friends. I said, hi, I'm Mark Lapidos, and I'd like to speak to John about a Beatle Fest. Now, somewhere in my collection, we have Harry telling that story.
Yeah,
from
Harry
his
tells it a little different.
He tells it, here's how he tells it. He said, here's what this guy, when I opened the door, here's what he said. He said, hi, I'm Mark Lapidos, John Lennon, Beatle Fest.
Something like that.
We have to find that tape.
Harry needed subtitles to get through that meeting.
We have it on tape somewhere. So, Harry Nilsson, come on in. Why not? So I'm sitting in the parlor, talking to Harry, and waiting a few minutes, and just a couple minutes later, in walks John. Hi, get up, say hello, shake his hand. I had thoughts in my mind of saying to him, do you remember meeting me in 1969 in front of Apple when I got your autograph and took your picture? That raced through my head.
Yes, he's going, is that you?
Was that you? No, I didn't ask him that. I held it in. It was not easy.
Yeah,
that was a big moment in my life to meet him
of course.
on the street and get his autograph and shake his hand.
Of course it was.
That's when I actually walked around London and said, I shook one of their hands. I want to work for the Beatles. That's what I said.
That's what I want to
was
do.
saying it to my friend. We're walking around London all night.
Yeah.
He was a fan, but he wasn't like a fanatic.
Right.
So he thinks I'm nuts. But I shook his hand. I got his autograph. I took a picture.
No, it's
So and I didn't say any of that to John.
Mark Lapidos, Apple Scruff.
I was able to stop my mind from wandering.
Okay, yes.
So John sits down and I tell him all about my idea. I want to have a convention in a hotel. I must have told him dates because I already had the dates. And we're going to have movies and memorabilia and discussions and art and just have people coming to the show and having a good time, celebrating a common love for the Beatles. So I finished telling him that, and he says, I'm all for it. I'm a Beatles fan too.
Gotta love that. Now,
I swear, right this moment, I can see it'll never go away from my mind. It's like the great meeting John 5 years earlier also, I'll never forget. But this one, he's saying, I'm all for it. I'm a Beatles fan too. He says, come back on Tuesday and we'll get it all straight, all worked out.
yeah, and you have to remember, the Beatles as a group are just 4 years in the rearview mirror, and
Suing each other.
they're suing each other, and that's what's going on with them. Going on with us is what? Will they ever get back together again, right? That was the prevailing thought. I mean, even going to the earliest fests, 74 through 79, all the chit-chat that we have here about Paul going on tour and new books and and anything like that, none of those conversations ended with anything but, do you think they're going to get back together? Or more to the point, when do you think they're going to get back together? And remember, this wave of Beatlemania that had started the year before, one of the things that fueled it, not by a little, but by a lot, was the fact that all four of them appeared on Ringo's album the year before. And that was a real beacon of hope.
It's only 5 months before, actually. 4 months.
It's a beacon of hope for people to say, at least temperatures are warming up. Is it possible? And, will this 4-year nightmare be over? But, back to you.
Back to me. So, I come back on Tuesday, and Hillary Gerard was there. He was Ringo's personal assistant.
Attorney, yep.
And he gets on the phone with Neil in London. Now, you got to remember, 1974, to call London is $9.95 for a minute, and then like $6 a minute after that. And not like now that you can call London for an hour for $4 or something. Yeah. So this was on a 26-year-old. It's important, you call and you're on the phone 20 minutes, you're spending $50 or something. Right, yeah. So, I was aware of it. He's on the phone at least an hour and 45 minutes. He had to go to the bathroom. He goes,
go ahead,
puts the phone, comes back 10 to 15 minutes later, and they pick up the conversation. I'm saying, this could be $1,000 phone call.
These are in the days when the
and
words
from a hotel.
Right, the words you never wanted to hear was, what time is it by you? Is it tomorrow yet? Just the time difference you didn't want to be dealing with.
So anyway, we had a long conversation, and it was determined that they would provide all the Beatles films, including Magic Mystery Tour, which did anybody see Magic Mystery Tour before the first Beatle Fest?
I don't think I did.
I had a chance at college, but I had a midterm or something.
I don't think
from
I
Hofstra, from Adelphi.
Until the late 70s.
Yeah. So I never saw it. It was playing nearby, but I couldn't get away because I was in college in '69 or '68.
Yeah.
So they provided all the films, 10 promotional films. I think 7 would never. We had no idea they were made. And I know Something was one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, now they've all been played somewhat.
Yeah, I think in the first one it was like Penny Lane and Strawberry
Right,
Fields. Still in black and white.
Right, but those were on TV.
They were still black and white, though.
Right, but those were on TV. These were ones. 5 or 6 of them were never on TV.
And it's incredible that they're rallying around some common cause at Apple, because Apple itself is disintegrating. It's not like it is today, where it's a well-oiled machine, and whatever you need to call them for, somebody's in charge of songs, films, licenses, whatever it is. Apple is falling apart at this point, and they rally around this idea.
Yeah. Oh, let me go back a little bit, because I told John that we'd like to raise money for charity, with a charity raffle, get items from each Beatle. I said, would you like to pick the charity? He said, yes, the Phoenix House Foundation. for drug rehabilitation. It was Upper West Side, I think. And so that's what we raised money for. We actually raised just about $3,000. That's a lot of money
Which
back
then, that's a lot of money. Yeah.
So we got everything set. It was a handshake. My handshake with John. That was the deal.
That's a good handshake to get.
That's a wonderful handshake.
That's a good handshake.
That's a fabulous
Any
handshake.
day of the week, that's a good handshake.
Never a piece of paper involved. Got permission from John. It was a Beatles permission because one speaks and they all speak.
That's right.
All right? So I get drumsticks, signed drumsticks from Ringo almost immediately, like within a week or two, because Hillary worked with Ringo. And about a week before, in August, Tony King, he's written a book, but he's in England. I haven't seen the book, would love to see it. He's coming in from England, and he would like to meet with me at the Pierre Hotel. He knew I worked at Sam Goody, so I picked it's like a Tuesday, August 1st, one of those days. So I went to see him, and it was after the store closed. I knock on the door, and open the door. It's Tony King, and this guy is sitting on the couch. You probably never heard of him. 1974. Anybody know who was the most popular artist in the world in 1974?
Elton John.
Elton John is sitting on the couch. And I knew every song on Caribou. I loved Elton.
Yeah, it's a great record.
So I started having a long conversation with him. Like, You're So Static, is that the next single? He said, no, Bitch Is Back, they're starting to play it in Detroit or something, but that's the one I wanted to single, You're So Static. So we're having a long conversation. He had piles of cassettes on the counter. So he traveled with a lot of music. So he asked me, do we sell records at Sam Goody? Do we sell record players, cassette players also? I said, sure. So the next day, it was for some reason I had to go to their warehouse in Maspeth. And Elton John walks into the store and speaks to the other two managers and says, is Mark Lapidos here? He was there for an hour and a half. He bought a whole ton of stuff. He was looking at the singles, and there was some girl there looking also, so he couldn't find what she was looking for. And he said, can I help you? He says, yes, I'm looking for this record. She didn't look up. And he found it for her. So she comes to check out, and she pays. And the other two managers said, do you know who helped you? I said, no. He said, why don't you take a look over there?
Yeah. I mean, Elton
He
John.
helped her find a record, the 45, and I missed all that. And I walked back in. I was heartbroken. But anyway, it was just nice to have an hour and a half conversation with the number one artist in the world at the time, who was one of my top three favorites.
Nothing wrong with that.
No. So we go back. So I had a nice long talk with Tony. About a week, maybe 10 days before the Beatle Fest, he calls me and said, did you get autographs from Paul, George, and Ringo? I said, I got Ringo's drumsticks, but nothing from Paul and George. Really? No, nothing. So he goes back and tells John. John calls Paul and says, how come you didn't send anything to this Beatle Fest? Something signed. He said, I didn't know about it. Too many layers of people. He calls George. How come you didn't send anything to the fest? He said, too many. I didn't know about it. He says, well, we got to get some autographs going. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So John had a guitar that Paul had bought when he was with John in Spain.
Okay.
So he signed that and said, this is Paul's guitar, signed John Lennon, 1974. And then there's a tablet that George used in Within You, Without You.
Wow.
So he signed that, saying, this is George, I certify this is George Harrison's, and John Lennon signed it. And then John signed one of his own guitars, John Lennon with Love. And then Tony takes out 6 Penguin John Lennon books. You probably mostly know what that is the 2 books together, Spaniard in the Works and the first one, in his own words. So he signed 6 of them for the charity, the auction. And then he takes out a 7th one. And he said, this is for you from John. And I open it up. It says, to John with love, to Mark with love, John Lennon, September Beatlefest, 1974, with the little design that he crew and signed
It's awesome.
It's
I mean,
the most
come on,
precious thing in my collection.
That's incredible. It's incredible.
It was just amazing. And when he gave it to me, it was a Saturday morning. It was like 11 o'clock in the morning at the Commodore Hotel. I was a nervous wreck. I was completely...
Now, this is the weekend of the show.
This is the weekend of the show.
Okay.
Because I didn't know what was coming in
Yeah.
until Tony walked into the hotel.
Yep.
So he comes up to the suite. We had the presidential suite where President 1928, Hoover, the one who got...
I was never any good at geography. I don't know.
Hoover. Yeah, Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
So these big, bulky, single beds. It's a presidential suite. So I was just so nervous because what is going on? Is the show going to really happen? I mean,
of course it's
what's
gonna
happening?
happen.
I mean,
You've sold tickets.
But
Of
we were
course it's
selling
gonna
lots of tickets, but the reality hadn't really hit me until he walks in the room, and I'm a nervous wreck, and he gives me all these things, and once he gives me that last piece, it's like almost a calm came over me, and then he tells me, John would like to come tomorrow night to pick the winner of his guitar.
How about that? Okay.
My God.
How about that?
Of course, I wasn't going to tell anybody. It just so happened that a childhood friend of mine was a policeman that I happened to see on the street in that area. We recognized each other. So we walked through the kitchen to find a way to get John to the ballroom. It was a two-story ball. It was 2 floors. It was a second balcony, and we put a little microphone where people couldn't see it, so he could come up there.
Yep.
And Jim Kerr was our MC for the first year, still on radio.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And he started rumors. He started, I hear that John's in the lobby, and all those kind of, and people are screaming, and I'm keeping this secret of mine. And so let me go back a little bit. So 1 o'clock is happening, all right? 1 o'clock is when the doors open, all right? So I guess my staff let people in, and I come down at 5 after 1. I'm feeling a little better, I'm still not digesting all this stuff that just happened to me. And 5 minutes after this is 5 minutes after the doors open, I went into the balcony. How many were there in 2014? So you remember how big that room was, right?
Right.
I looked out the balcony. There wasn't a single seat empty. At 5 minutes after 1, when we opened at 1 o'clock, the place was packed. I said, these people are here because of me. I can't.
And just to put a number on that, that's blank thousand.
Couple of thousand people. Yeah, easily. It was a gigantic room.
Oh yeah.
And then I got really relaxed. I said, holy mackerel.
You're thinking, what
pulled
could
this
possibly go wrong? What could
No,
possibly
I
go
just stopped
wrong?
thinking about it. I said, oh my God, it's really happening. It's live. And then one of the staff members said, it's time to show the films. Films. We have a projection.
Apple sent the films.
We have a nice screen there. Apple sent the films. And at that very moment, again, I can't make this up, that very moment, this guy comes through the door and says, I'm a union projectionist. They called me. They read it in the paper. You're showing films. Where do I go? I said, right over there.
Yeah.
Without stopping a beat. Right.
Yeah.
And the films went right on.
Yeah.
It's like, who knew you had needed a projectionist?
Right. It's a union house. You don't know what's going on.
So we played all the films, and we played Magical Mystery Tour, which pretty much no one had seen that night. We actually closed the show with the film.
And for years, was that intentional? I know Magical Mystery Tour used to close the fest.
Yeah,
was that kind of an homage to the first one?
I didn't think of it that way, but yeah I guess so. But we really weren't focusing on special guests, even though Sid Bernstein was a special guest, and we had Pete Bennett. So 2 people who...
Yeah, sure.
But we didn't have the headliners like we've done over the past 50 years. So it was more like films and discussions and live music. We had a band.
And the dealer's room.
And the dealer's room, yeah.
I mean, that was the...
And I remember we had an art museum in the early days, and it just... It was a one convention idea, and a month later, well, a week later, Melody Maker magazines, it's their Rolling Stone in England. It says, we may have created the Beatles, but it took American ingenuity to create a Beatles fest.
That's
Beatles
great.
Fest.
Yeah.
Tune in, the cover. Tune in next week for the story. So it was a lead-in by Chris Charlesworth, who was like the managing editor. I found out later he was working in New York.
Yep.
So a week later, Melody Maker magazine in England has my story on their cover. I was amazed.
Now,
Wait.
Go ahead.
So 6 weeks later, on October 24th edition of Rolling Stone, there's a picture of a Beatles lunchbox. Strange rumblings in Pepperland. I made the cover of Rolling Stone.
on the cover of the Rolling Stone.
And it was like a 6-page story. They reprinted the entire trivia quiz.
Wow.
40 questions. And
Well-
they talked about it. I made the cover of Rolling Stone
Listen,
on my
and
first event.
That's
I
a
couldn't-
great lead-in to a question I was formulating in my head, speaking of covers. Okay, the Beatles gave so much to you and so much to all of us, but something got taken from that first fest that ended up on the cover of a John Lennon album. Is that right? Jürgen's photo?
Yes,
Yes.
of course. So in the beginning of August, that's a very good side story. Jürgen Vollmer calls me, living in the Bronx. He says, I have these I heard about your Beatle Fest. I have these photos that I took of the Beatles back in Hamburg in '61. What can I do with them? So of course, as a fan, I said, why don't you send me a sample of each one, and then I could tell you what to do with them. So
He was on to you when you said frame them. He was on to you at that point, yes.
So he sends me them, and I'm looking at these pictures. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Are you?
Right now,
Wow.
right
Now
now-
we all know the photos now, but these were never published.
Right.
And one of them was John standing in the doorway.
Right.
And there was all the photos. There was a great photo of George.
There's great photos from
You know
Hamburg.
all the photos.
They're
I don't have to go into that. So he has it. I said, you must make copies and take a booth at the show. And it's a lot of money back then. It was $40 for a table. So he takes a table, and May Pang was John's official representative because she worked for him at the time, etc. And she walks in, and she buys one of each of the photos, brings them back to John that night, and John looks at it and said, that's my album cover. Got in touch with Jürgen. They had a reunion. They hadn't seen each other in 13 or 14 years.
So, yeah.
And that became the album cover because he sent me the
Right, I mean, so we had Beatle
pictures.
history, or, Beatles history current events edition coming out of the very first fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff.
It was. And we raised $2,974 for the charity. I invited John to, thank you, if he wanted to make the presentation with me. He said no. November of '74, there was the opening at the Beacon Theater, not the Beacon Theater?
Beacon Theater, yep.
It was Sgt. Pepper's
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band on the road.
On the road,
Yeah.
right. So I got tickets, and I was sitting like in the 5th row, and John walks in, I guess it was still with May,
Yeah.
yeah, and he sits about 4 rows behind me. So I went over to him and I thanked him very much, and I told him, about 2 or 3 minutes, I told him how the show went on and how it was, and that I thanked him very much, and he was very glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So that was pretty. There was Bob Gruen told me this story only about 10 years ago. He said, Mark, I called John from the lobby. You remember those things? You had to take out a dime and you go into a booth with the young people. Anybody under 30 has
They must
no
have
idea what I'm
one
talking
here,
about.
right?
You had to put a dime.
Do they have one
You had to put
here?
a dime.
They have one
Yes,
here.
they do, because it's retro. This is '62, so they put a dime. He called John and said, "You won't believe it. You got to come down here now. It's an amazing event." So John almost came down.
Wow.
So he didn't. I guess he got cold feet and went to the country. But he was interviewed on Saturday, September 7th, the first day of the fest, by Lisa Robinson in Circus or Crawdaddy?
I think she was Circus.
Circus. And she said, John, just a few blocks away, there's a Beatles convention going on. He said, yeah, I know, I met with the guy, it was a great idea. And then he says, it sort of smacks of Rudolph Valentino. Never explained what that meant. You have to feel it. You have to guess what he said, figure it out. That's what he said. It's quoted in the magazine. So I never asked John what he meant by that because I had other things to say.
Got a couple other things to say. Mark, it's an incredible story. I mean, it is.
Thank you.
It is.
It is.
And
that's why we're all here.
A fan, and here we are. 50
John
years later.
he had such a sense.
Yeah.
Of people.
Yeah.
That he had his whole life. And he really sensed what I wanted to do and the vision I had, and he wanted to help do it.
Yeah.
And he really almost came to the show.
Yeah.
And each of the next 6 years called and he donated signed items for the charities.
That's awesome.
Each year through 79.
Yeah. Mark, the history that has happened on this stage, or some version of this stage, has been pretty incredible. But I wanted to talk to you about a couple of, real tollgate moments, turning point moments in the history of the fest. And do you guys want to hear about that? Yeah, I think that'd be fun, right? Okay, so, I remember, I wasn't at the first one. I started going when I was in high school in the late 70s. And go do the math later. But I remember, as things changed, as, early fest, we'd say, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to get to watch A Hard Day's Night. Or we're going to go watch Help. Or we're going to go watch Let It Be or something. And that was one of the main things on your checklist to do, was go watch a Beatles movie, which today we take for granted, right? You can go home and watch A Hard Day's Night anytime you want. Okay, but there was something much, much bigger in early 1981 that presented kind of a crossroads for the fest. And given John's influence and place, not just as a Beatle, but as one of the initial supporters of the fest, tell folks what that was like end of 80, early into 81, because the fest was lined up for February of 81, and there was, really, it was time to take stock.
We had no idea what we were going to do. How can we have a convention after what happened? I got so sick immediately. I didn't get out of bed for a week. I guess some of you also got the same sickness, and you couldn't move. It was like the worst disaster in the history of the planet.
Right.
It's like this it couldn't really happen, and we couldn't. How could we go forward with this? How can we?
And again, it's a legitimate question at that point. Certainly, the thing I was talking about before, will they ever get back together? It just seemed like the least important thing in the within the context of it, but. We'd come to now learn the fest after 5-6 years and said, wow, this is fun, and it's the place I'm going to go find all my import records and find good stuff in the dealer's room and go watch Help on the big screen. And all these friends I've made at the fest, which is the fest's ultimate legacy in my own estimation, is the people we've met along the way, not just on this stage, but out among us all. So there was really quite a show of support to say, you should think about whether you're doing this, but it was, you can't possibly not do this, right? Was that the overwhelming sentiment?
Overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was the support of you, folks. I'm sure some of you probably contacted us back then. But it was just so overwhelming that Cal and I looked at each other and said, I guess we have to do this. It was very difficult, and I made it very specific. We talked about it. Said we're not going to make any public announcement on this.
Right.
We sent the letters out. Remember the 10-cent stamps, and we sent letters to the people who had been there in the past. We made no public announcement on it whatsoever. I didn't want any people who were just curious about what was happening. We needed a convention for us. We needed it, and I didn't want any outsiders. No, we never sent the press release out. We never called any press at all.
Right.
Zero. I mean, we could have gotten 10,000 people.
Of course. No, I mean, you talk about a renewed interest. This was 73 or 76 when Wings was going across America. This was yet another wave, but this was a tidal wave.
This was a tidal
of people,
wave.
you know, revisiting their love for the Beatles.
There was such a high demand for tickets that the Saturday totally was oversold. So Cal and I had to start calling people. Can you switch to Sunday? And a couple hundred people switched to Sunday so we get everybody in. And we also asked people if you would send your thoughts, whether it be in art or in words. Tell us how you feel, and we'll put a book together.
Yeah.
My God, we got over 100, maybe 150, and we printed every one.
Does anyone have that book? Was anyone at that fest? I know I still have that book somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, all poetry and artwork and drawings, and even if it wasn't poetry, it could have just been, you know, stream of consciousness. John meant the world to me because, you know, it was unbelievably moving stuff.
Oh yeah, sure. It was raw feelings.
Oh,
you know?
it was still entirely too raw.
This is before computers and before typesetting. You know, that they can just type it in and print it. So in addition to having to print our regular program book, we decided to print every item. So you have to cut out the articles and type them up and paste them and figure out where it's going to go. It's like a long process. We had a lot of friends help us, and it took us a long time. And we printed it. We gave them out to every single person who was there. And one person said, I did that. That's my cover.
Yeah.
I said, why don't you open the cover and see who gets credit for it? It was her. She was so excited about it. It was her cover. It was a beautiful picture.
Lennon on the rooftop, right? Was the
No, it was, Carol, how would you describe that? You're the artist. Not on the rooftop, just a drawing.
Yeah, it's a drawing of it's the image of the rooftop, the glasses and the long hair, Okay. Yeah. Not a photo, a drawing.
The drawing.
Yeah,
it was a beautiful drawing. So we gave it out to everybody at the show, and it was like a morning. We had to go through it all to get out of it, and I should have called Jimmy Fink. He was our MC. He made such a wonderful comment that it really was very healing. I got to call him. Carol, remind me. I want to call him and just find out what that comment was, because it was beautiful, and I can't remember it. But it got us through. He started the show that way, and it was beautiful. And we all started feeling better and said, we have to celebrate. You know, it's still...
That's what actually I remember about it, is that it wasn't what it easily could have been, people just still in shock and still in mourning and openly mourning. No, it was people more celebrating their life. I think the fans, the crowd actually took it up a notch, and that whole sense of what people were writing to you saying, you can't not do this, was spot on.
Yeah, they were right. And we did it because you guys said, we got to have it. And we did it. Thank you very much. I mean, because that was an important show.
I mean,
how many were there in '81?
I was there, sure.
All right. 6, 7, 8.
You know, talking about celebrating the history of the fest. Now, we don't want to, you know, leave any one out, so I'm not going to ask you, who were your favorite guests of all time? Your answer would be yes, all of them. But you know, who here has been to, let's say, more than 5 fests? Okay. More than 10? Okay. More than 20? Okay, a few. All right. So there's people here who could...
135?
135? Only 3. No, odd. No. I mean, there are some truly unforgettable moments. Okay, and invariably they're tied to guests or events on the stage and things like that. Top 5 that stick out in your mind as the ultimate wow moments of 50 years.
1975, I invited Mal Evans as a guest.
That ain't a bad one.
And he accepted.
Yeah.
And he came, and here's a guy nobody knew. We knew that we've seen images, we heard of him. We didn't know anything about him. All we knew is that he took care of the Beatles.
Yep.
Whatever they needed, he and then Neil took care of their boys. Right? He comes to this show. I met him at the Plaza, I guess, in April. And this week, I didn't know what I was going to do. It was a one convention idea. But I started, after the Rolling Stone story, I started getting letters, notes from all over the country. You got to do it again.
Yeah.
Bring it to LA, bring it to Chicago, bring it to Texas or whatever. So I said, public is speaking, they want me to do it again, so I did it. So I invited Mal, and he accepted. And he was a star. He didn't have anything to sell. He was signing autographs all the time, the whole weekend. He was on stage with the band and playing a tambourine and singing.
Yeah.
And he was treated like a star.
Yeah,
he was never
absolutely.
treated like a star. And he paid me the biggest compliment of my life. He said to me, Mark, this was the greatest weekend of my life. And I'm thinking, I would trade 1,000 of his weekends for one of mine. Are you kidding me?
I mean, you guys here.
He worked with the Beatles for 13 years.
And we're still working with them.
Yeah,
Okay,
he was still working with them.
And for those of you guys have seen Ken Womack's presentation about the Mal Evans book. It's just great, and the book is great. And go say hi to Mal's daughter Julie while you're at it. That's one of the points that is made early on in that book, is that Mal had this kind of show business yearning, and attaching himself to the Beatles was kind of his entree to that world. He wouldn't be a star, but he would be close enough to stardom to experience what it was like. So having him as a guest of honor and being truly a star of the show had to have appealed to him.
Oh yeah, it certainly did. We were watching, I was sitting next to him in the balcony watching Magical Mystery Tour. And he's telling me stories behind the scenes while the film was being shown. Yeah. And I wish I would have been smart enough to write them all down.
Right.
Because I forgot all of them except one. And this was not known at the time, and now I guess everybody knows it. So it's the scene where Paul's doing Fool on the Hill.
Yeah.
And we all know now he went to France, right, to go to the Alps to do the footage, and then came back. What we didn't know, that he's telling me while it's going on, Paul said, I want to go to the Alps and do this footage. So okay, so they go, I guess they drive, I don't know how they went, but they flew or they went to the channel, and they said, okay, where are your passports? We don't have a passport.
Oops.
We need passports. So Mal goes,
Right.
oh, okay, sure, come on in.
Yeah.
It costs whatever the money is. Paul, you have any money on you? I never carry money. Mal never carried any money. No money, no ID.
No passport.
Come on in.
Come on in. Well,
you don't say no to a Beatle, folks.
All right. Rank has its privilege.
So
after
I don't know how they
all,
did.
yeah.
They must have had a photographer with him because they went to the Alps, they shot, and they came back.
Yeah.
But that's the world of being a Beatle.
Yeah.
And it's just, it was during the time that they were Beatles, in 67.
I mean, and the stories, that are in that book are just incredible. And having Mal's daughter here, and actually Ken, shameless plug time, Mal's son, Gary, will be with us on the Fab Forum this coming Wednesday night on the Beatles channel. So
yeah, Gary was going to be a
dial us
guest
up.
here, but he had some eye surgery, and they didn't know when it was going to be, and he wasn't allowed to travel.
Yeah.
Because of whatever.
He was at the book launch, Mal's son, and a charming guy, Gary. And
really.
who here's ever played the game? If you could go back to one Beatles concert to witness it, what would it be? And people invariably say Shea or The Roof or Cavern, the Queen. He upped the ante for everybody and said, Pick 5 or 10 minutes of Beatle history that you wish you could go back and witness. 5, 10 minutes, just something. And the point was for him to say, yep, he was there for that. Yep, he was there for that. So Gary undoubtedly will have some great stories to tell come Wednesday night. So that should be fun. And maybe we'll get him for Chicago. Maybe.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay.
We got Julie. She has some good stories, but
Sure.
she was a little bit younger, so.
Right, but
so
Gary's in a lot of those pictures, like around the Magical Mystery Tour.
The
Time. He's
Mad Day
maybe-
Out.
Yeah,
He's
he's
in those
maybe
pictures.
6, 7 years old. Or,
No, he was older than that. He was maybe 11, I think. 10 or 11?
be early 60s
I think she
to
was-
67. Yeah, no.
I thought she was 7.
Yeah, they're young
whatever.
kids.
They were
Okay.
kids, but he was older and went.
Yeah, so
and saw
there's
the
great
Beatles.
stories to be had there. All right, so Mal Evans as your first real big fish that you landed. Other fab moments on the Fest stage.
Maybe it may not be in order,
No particular order.
but Donovan.
Donovan being on the stage.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
and
he's
we
great.
had him in 2003, and I just love the guy. And he's playing songs on the stage. He walks off and said, "Donovan, would you please play it? Would you mind playing Atlantis for me?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I'd be honored." And I just love that song. And he played Atlantis on the spot, and
Yeah, no, Donovan
that was a
great.
moment for me I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And we had him a couple of times.
Yep.
He came to the one in 2014.
Yep.
And what a guy! Really
Terrific. Donovan
really,
was awesome.
and he's so connected to the Beatles.
Oh,
He
God,
he
yeah.
he revealed that lyrics in the George
Yeah,
wrote.
Yep, for Hurdy-Gurdy Man.
Hurdy-Gurdy Man.
Yep.
I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget them, but I don't
There's
have
actually a
them in my mind.
live album where he's playing that and
Yeah.
he's going through the chord progression and says, and we went to India with me and a couple of Beach Boys and a couple of Beatles. And I said, George, I've got this song. And George said, I could write a verse for that.
And
And
he
then he
did.
says, would you like to hear it? No. Yeah, of course we
he
want to
played
hear
it.
it. And he plays it for you. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, then after that, he started playing it on his tours.
Yeah.
But I don't think he played it ever till the Fest.
It's on. I don't know when the live album was recorded. It is on one of his live albums, though,
Right,
if
but-
you want to hear it
Yeah.
from the master.
Okay,
Donovan,
another one.
Mal Evans. What else? I have a list in my head.
Billy Preston.
His last full show.
Billy Preston in 2005.
His
he
last
was a
full
guest.
show,
He was a
yeah.
guest. I don't know, maybe 8 times, 6
Yeah,
or 8
so
times
he's
over
there
the
a few
years,
times,
over
yeah.
the cities. He walks in. He needed a kidney transplant. Or
Yeah,
something.
he was having
He
dialysis.
was very, very ill, and his agent calls me from the suite and said, "I don't think he can come on. Why don't you come up and talk to him?" So I went up to his room, and he was in bed. He wasn't feeling so well. And I said, "Billy, you know, if you can't do it, you can't do it." So he looks at me and said, "I'll do it." So he comes walking to the stage, you know, the back. I mean, he really wasn't well. He was like somebody was holding him. And it was very difficult for him to move. And he sits down on the side of the stage, and he had a band with him.
Yeah, he brought his own band. I remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And he's slowly being helped onto the stage, gets to the top stage, and he leaps onto the stage. Only one step, but he leaps. There's a guy who was in bed 20 minutes earlier, not being able to move, and he goes over to the keyboard, and he plays for 45 minutes, and it was absolutely astounding.
Brought the house down.
It
was
brought the
awesome.
house down like we've never seen it. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
dancing across the stage like he used to do. And afterwards, Carol and I are walking with him in the lobby, and this never happened any fest before. And people are just coming up to us, I can't, wow, what a great
Yeah.
show, the greatest I've ever.
That was an incredible show.
Comments and people coming up to him. And as we're walking towards the signing room to sign, and I never saw that before. I mean, it was just.
Yeah,
it
he
was
just-
like-
he
it was
sprung
like
to life,
He knew,
you know? Yeah.
maybe he knew that this is going to be the end
No,
of the
he
road.
sprung to life when he got on
Yeah,
the stage.
but he-
Billy was, that
yeah.
was amazing.
And a year later, he died from the pancreatic. Was it
Yeah.
pancreatic
Yeah.
cancer? I think.
Tell us more. Tell us more.
That's 3, right?
That's 3.
Oh, I got so many. I don't know.
How about
Peter and Gordon.
The Peter and Gordon reunion.
Reunion. Okay, they played one night.
Yeah.
They played one night at the
Mike
B.B.
Smith
King's.
benefit. Yep.
The Mike, you were there. I was there. Carol was there, and we had Gordon on as a guest before. So I was sitting there talking to Gordon. I said, "What do you think if have you guys there?" He said, "I'm in. You got to speak to Peter." So we had booked all the guests, not Peter and Gordon. And then Carol says to me, "Why don't you call Peter and invite him?" So I did. And he says, "Call me back tomorrow and tell me why you think I should come in 5 minutes, and I'll give you an answer." So I called him back. I gave him my best shot for 5 minutes. And the next day he calls me back and said, "Mark, you drove a hard bargain. I'll do it."
Yeah.
So the Peter and Gordon reunion, besides that one show, was created. Yeah, Chad and Jeremy was later on, but Peter, after they did it, it was Vegas. They did it for the first time in our Las Vegas show.
Yep.
And then we invited them to New York and Chicago, and they came.
It's great.
And then they went out on tour. And then,
Yeah.
unfortunately, Gordon died within 2 years.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, no.
it was the day of the Paul
Oh, no.
McCartney concert.
We were at the
Shea
McCartney
Stadium.
concert.
Was it
at
Shea
Citi
or was
Field.
it was
It
Citi
was the
Field?
opening of Citi Field,
Yeah.
2009.
And that's the day that that Gordon passed away.
Yeah.
So that was very momentous. And Peter became a friend, and he's been to many fests.
Oh, yeah.
With the show he does,
Oh, yeah.
and
Show
with
on Sirius.
and
yeah.
with all the other artists, Peter
Yeah.
and Jeremy, Peter and
Every combination.
who's the guitar?
Albert Lee. Yeah. Those were great shows.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my...
What about yours?
Well, I'm thinking of one that actually involves a guest who's here this weekend. She premiered a film at the fest about 10
That's
years
the
ago.
next one. Oh, you did that in Chicago.
Yeah.
Frida Kelly
Yeah.
had the film. We premiered it in the main ballroom,
Yeah.
and she got a 4-minute ovation. It was the biggest ovation we've
Incredible.
ever had at any fest.
Incredible.
And there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and the room was completely filled. And it was just an amazing film, and we had the premiere of it
Yep.
with Frida in person.
Yeah. That was...
So that was really
That was a big
magical.
day. That was
That
great.
was a big day. It was. And now she's here today.
And she's
And
with us
We're going
here
to show the
10
film.
years later, yeah.
So those of you who've never seen the film, I don't know how you can not be a Beatles fan and not see it.
see this. It's
all right?
incredible.
She has copies of this DVD or Blu-ray,
And are we
whatever.
showing that in the
If you don't
video
have,
room?
we're showing the video room. Yeah.
All right, we got to
If
check
you don't
our
have a
schedules
copy
for that.
and you're a fan, you have to see this
need to
film.
see this film.
It's really that good.
Well, and
All right? I'm not trying to do a sales pitch, but it's honestly and truly that good. And
Right.
it showed that day when she got that amazing
That was
ovation.
amazing.
We couldn't believe it.
there was another moment, a recent fest, that had to do with film, but without watching the film. I mean, how good could it be if you just have the director? Okay, if he's zooming in from half a world away.
2 years ago.
This, by the way, makes my list just because it was a technological marvel to get. Where was he, in New Zealand or Australia?
New Zealand. New Zealand.
And we had Michael Lindsay Hogg, and we got them
That
together.
we arranged that separately.
That was
It's a surprise.
absolutely incredible having the two of them talking about the Get Back movie.
Who?
You know, Peter's Get Back movie. You've all seen that, I'm sure.
Carol, what?
Yeah.
Say that again?
Victor Spinetti.
I'll get
We'll
to
get to Victor in a minute.
Okay,
But
So we were doing
having-
the test.
yeah,
We were doing
yeah,
the test on
yeah.
Friday night after the Friday night dance, and it's only staff in there until he set it up. So Peter's on the screen live. I guess it was whatever middle of the day over there.
yeah.
And we're doing tests for like 10 or 15 minutes, and it's become very apparent to all 10 of us who were there, 15,
Yeah.
that he's a real Beatles geek.
Oh, he's the real
Right.
deal. For
He's
sure.
the real deal. So I said, that's what the fest is all about, Beatle geeks. He says, I'll just have to come to one of these in person.
Yeah.
So I did invite him for this one, but I
Yeah.
guess 12,000 miles is a little bit.
I don't think it was the 12th. I think it was you saying you need to bring all 900 hours of the film.
I should have
It
said
may
that
have
too.
been that,
Right,
Mark.
and show it over
Yeah,
a
right.
4-week period.
Right, show it over a month. I think that might. But But then having Michael Lindsay Hogg.
Yes, that was my idea, if I
just
remember
to
correctly.
have the two of them, like kind of as a hub here, but
So-
talking to each other, comparing,
Right,
get back notes.
And you and Darren and other
Michaels.
and Ken Michaels would
Yeah.
talk. We're interviewing him,
Peter,
and then we bring on Michael Lindsay Hogg. And not a word from any of you guys or anybody.
Oh, no.
They talked for 45 minutes, and it was like they never met each other. They still never met.
No, I know but they were comparing notes about the rooftop show. Now you're talking about
and in the weeds. Talking about in the weeds, Peter's coming up with these things.
Yeah.
Well, why did you do that? Why did you turn that volume up to whatever it was? It was like, I'm sure a bunch of you were there, right, 2 years ago? It was just it was a magic.
Ken Michaels, Darren DeVivo, a couple of our co-MCs this weekend, people I've known for years, they're dear friends. Yeah, I have loads of pictures from over the years that, you take with your friends or people take on stage and send them to you. This picture, the three of us are looking up at a screen. We look like school children, okay? We are looking up like we're seeing Santa Claus or something for the first time. We were absolutely out of our element at this point. We said, okay, let's turn this over to the pros up here,
And this hour segment is turning into an hour and a half, and of course we have a lot of other things going on, and Ken Dashow wasn't about to kick him off the stage.
What are you going to do? Say,
So
guys, that's all the time we have.
Who could possibly be the person that has to do the job?
It's lonely at the top, Mark.
I'm the guy.
Your name's on the door.
So I walk
walk
on the stage.
Just like that.
With the microphone, I'm looking up at the screen with these two guys and said, guys, this is really about the most difficult thing I've had to do, but we have to move on with the show. And whatever I said, I guess it worked.
Yeah.
And we gave the rousing ovation, standing
incredible.
ovation.
Absolutely
and
incredible.
It was just great. And
no, that was clearly on my highlight list.
He said he wants to come. I did invite him for this show. And
Yeah.
But 12,000 miles, I guess, is a.
Well, come for the 70th. What do you think of that? What do you think of that?
It's a G-rated show, PG.
Okay,
Forget about it.
Okay.
Do we have any? Victor Spinetti.
Victor
Spinetti, what a guy.
Master storyteller.
Oh,
master.
He was the best storyteller we've ever had. Don't base it on facts. I mean, yes, he did. Some of the facts were wrong. It didn't matter. It was the essence of the stories that were real, and that's. Yeah. Am I right?
Of course.
Yeah. And he was just one that he's a professional actor. This guy, right? He was a big star, and he just knew how to tell stories. He was just a fabulous storyteller.
Yeah.
And one summer, I guess 2008, I think, we had him in L.A. and Chicago. No, it was Vegas and Chicago. Was it? Yeah, it was Vegas and Chicago. And he wanted to stay, it was like 6 weeks apart. He wanted to stay in LA with some friends. And he wanted to take the train from LA through Dallas to Chicago because he wanted to see the country the way that he wanted to see. He just wanted to view it. He didn't want to fly there and miss all that. So it took him a couple days, and he just had a glorious time. But that's like, that's a special thing.
Yeah, the guests and, I mean, some of my own personal favorite memories are, I won't forget the time I found that Ringo Russian bootleg in the dealers. These are personal moments, but there was another one. I mean, talk about going deep. You mentioned Harry Nilsson before. Was a great friend of the fest. And you've also talked about movies no one had ever seen before. And one year, Harry bought with him Son of Dracula, a movie he made with Ringo, the first rock horror movie. And no one had seen that. It had played for like 2 nights in Atlanta. And our good friend Mickey Dolenz, who's here this weekend, has a great quote about that in the Harry Nilsson documentary. He says, most movies get released. This one escaped. But again, you talk about the challenges going on at Apple, because it was an Apple film. The second reel was missing from the vault. They only, if I'm making this up,
like an hour and 12 minutes. It's
right.
like an hour and a half.
He had the first reel of the film, and then came up at the end and told people how it ended. All right, so after that, da-da-da-da-da-da, and he did it, and he played Remember at the piano, right? I mean, so that was kind of great, because Harry, he didn't tour or anything, so getting Harry onto a stage to sing
he was known
a real
as a star
treat.
that never performed in public.
Yeah.
But that's not true, because once he got on our stage, started in '82, when he sort of stammered onto the stage in Rye-Town Hilton, and sort of said, Chris, he sort of kicked him off the drums and sat down and started playing drums, and then it sort of grew after a while, and then he started singing on the stage, then he started performing, and then Hey Jude comes on, we're all leave the stage. I'm not finished.
He ain't done.
He's on the piano, we all have to come back. And it was just, and he was magic with
that. That lasted the rest of his life. He kind of liked it. And Ringo All-Star Band fans out there, where are you? All right. Harry's last public performance was with Ringo and the All-Stars in Las Vegas. He came out and sang Without You with the 1995 band. How about that? So that was
He did that on our stage. He played that.
Yeah.
He played a lot of it.
He's doing it with Ringo on drums. A little bit different.
A little bit different.
A little bit different.
A lot different.
A little bit different. So
but he was like the smartest person I ever met. Really. He was so acute on things. He did it in Los Angeles on stage. He said, I can take 5 or 10 Beatles songs at random and make it sound like one song, and you'll never know the difference, and you'll know that it's that song that he's singing. So random people named Beatles songs, and he did a song, drew A, give me an A on the piano, and he started singing all these songs. He had a great memory, so he didn't even have to write them down. He knew the songs, and went from one to the other, and it flowed like one song.
Well, he had done that as early as, what was it, 67, I guess, was that his version of You Can't Do That, right? And then he did it again with Ringo.
Yeah, but this was live.
I know, putting him on the spot.
This was live.
Yeah.
It was really amazing.
He did that Back Off Boogaloo medley with Ringo on the Smell the Roses album. Yeah. So he's,
Which you did an interview on that one.
Well, that's actually, if you have time for a quick story, that's how I got to do the interview with Ringo. One of Ringo's archivists heard that version of Back Off Boogaloo with all the medley of other songs, and asked our program director, actually our vice president, Lou Simon, like he had recorded a clip of it and said, hey, what is this? And Lou said, I don't know, but I know who will know. And he sent it to me, and I said, oh yeah, that's Ringo and Harry from 1981 doing, the Back Off Boogaloo medley. And following this email trail, you see, I told you he would know, da-da-da-da-da. And I said, well, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of that record. And by the way, it's a very good record, very, very underrated record, Stop and Smell the Roses. I said, and it has incredible history. Okay, Paul and George are on it. Okay, we can start there. It's Ringo's last top 40 hit, Rack My Brain. It's during the making of this album he meets Barbara Bach, who they were now married 40 years. And the plan was, in addition to George and Ringo, that John was to have been on that album. Ringo and John meet in November of 1980, Thanksgiving weekend. I mean, it's just weeks before. And John gives him some of those cassettes that maybe you've heard on the Lost Lennon tapes or in the Lennon anthology, where he says, oh, this will be a good one for Ringo, and it's Nobody Told Me or Life Begins at 40 or one of those. So it was to have had the 3 Beatles on it. And for all these reasons, I said, you know what? We, the Beatles channel, we should do a special on this, and we should ask Ringo if he'd be into doing it. And through that email chain, they said, guess what? He's into it. Okay.
Tom did the interview with Ringo.
Did that interview with Ringo
Wonderful.
About that album, and it was smack in the middle of COVID. Okay, it's 2021. He's in Los Angeles. I'm a safe 3,000 miles away here in New York, and but he was very, very focused on it, and what he seemed to enjoy most, and in talking to his manager, said, now, you've seen this done, and it's uncomfortable.